So we're here today. We got another testimony from a good sister of mine. Her name is Yadi. Yadi, introduce yourself to everybody. Let them know who you are.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yari. I'm from Miami, Florida, originally from Puerto Rico. I've lived most of my life in Miami, and most of my testimony is from here, from Miami, with my experience as a childhood. I've been through a lot, so I'm here to share my testimony.
Okay. So before we start, where's your church? Where you located? Where you serve at?
I'm in Homestead, Florida. It's about 20, 30 minutes from the city of Miami. My church is called Life Point Church. It's here in Homestead. It's literally like 10 minutes away from my house. I've been attending my home church for about 3 years now, which is it was spirit led. I was attending another church where I originally got saved. I was going to that church for about 10 years, and literally from one day to another, the Lord said, "Okay, you're not going to your home church anymore. You're going to this church." And it was hard, but I obeyed, and I'm glad I did because I met a new group of people that has helped me in my walk.
Okay, so I'm gonna just go back a little bit because before we get into what God is doing in your life now, I want to go back and know who you was before God entered your life. What was you about? You in Miami, so I know you was hitting the clubs, you was painting the town red. What type of stuff was you getting into? So in a brief, can you put that all in one ball and just give us a brief of
Wow.
go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna try to put it onto one small summary. I grew up in a broken home. I did have both parents in the home, but it was almost as if they weren't there. They were both alcoholics. My dad struggled with alcohol and drugs, and they had a lot of drama in their relationship. You know, a lot of cheating, a lot of stuff going on to the point where my mom ended up being depressed for several years. Even my dad too, in the struggle with his addictions, he was diagnosed with depression. He even tried to commit suicide. So with all that going on in the home, I'm the youngest. I have an older sister. It almost felt like if we raised ourselves, you know, we did the best that we could, and we grew up angry, the both of us, because all we saw was domestic violence in the home. My dad was always angry. He never hit me, but he was always physical with my sister, and all we saw was just anger. You know, him and my mom were always arguing. He would always try to put his hands on my sister, on my mom, and he even tried to kill my mom in front of me. And for whatever reason, my mom used me as a shield. So I had a lot of anger growing up because of that. I always looked at my friends and always thought, wow, like they have the perfect life. Why I couldn't have that type of family? So we grew up angry. Growing up, moving forward, middle school, my sister used to get in a lot of fights in high school as well. Then when it was my turn to go to middle school and high school, same thing. I was always angry. It was mostly because I couldn't control my emotions. I couldn't tell anyone. I was embarrassed of my situation. So moving forward as an adult, I took all that with me, all that anger, and it had its consequences. You know, it it caused a lot of friction in relationships and friendships. Even as a mom, years later, I made a lot of bad choices because of my anger issues that I had. I was also depressed. I struggled with anxiety. I struggled with suicide. I did try to commit suicide a few times. Um, I mean, living in Miami doesn't help. It's a lot of wickedness in this city, you know, just like you said, there's clubs everywhere, bars everywhere. So I was a teenage mother, but because of that, I think it put a lot of pressure on me. Although my son's father and I were together, I felt like I was a single mom. So I was trying to find a way to cope with feeling the loneliness and the pressure of being a single mom. So I ended up, you know, going out to different clubs, just randomly going to different places with my older sister, of course. And, you know, that actually introduced me to drinking. So something that I always used to tell myself was like, I would never be like my parents. Like I would never touch alcohol. I saw what it did in my home. But going and living that club life, it introduced me to alcohol. So I started drinking, here and there when I would go out. Then years later, as an adult, I liked it. I liked getting drunk. So every weekend, I found whatever reason I could use to just drink. Drink until I passed out, drink until I couldn't anymore. So I made a lot of bad decisions. And, it had to do with my upbringing. And the sad part is that sometimes as adults, we like to justify our actions by using what we went through as children, but I didn't want to do that.
So
So
let me ask you real quick because usually um, the way we when we get in relationships with other people, usually it impacts us when we're kids, pretty much. Like if you, for me, I struggled with affection issues, right? So me growing up, the first thing that I wanted to do, I wanted a woman with that type of affection because I didn't get it from my mother. You know what I'm saying? So you growing up, going through these situations, how did it impact you later on when you had your kid and you was in relationships? How was that relationship before, God entered your life? Because we're gonna get
um
into it. So
well, I lived in a broken home, so I would always tell myself like whoever I end up with, like I'm gonna endure whatever I need to endure so my child or my children don't live in a broken home. I'm going to try my best to get along with, my spouse, my boyfriend, husband, whatever. So I ended up in toxic relationships and I endured a lot of things I shouldn't have, but I stuck it out because in my mind, I thought like I had to hold the family together. Like I didn't see my parents do it. I didn't see them fight for each other. They were fighting each other, but they weren't fighting for the relationship. So I always thought it was my responsibility to always fight for the relationship, knowing that it was toxic, knowing that I shouldn't have been in those relationships.
so you were more like you were more passive and more, you know, more
Yeah.
yeah, taking things in. So, you know,
Hmm.
upon that, there's a couple questions I wrote down that I wanted to ask you, right? And one of the questions is, um, when did God first called you in ministry, and how did it played out?
So years later, after I got saved, back in 2016, I joined and I met a group of women, which were the women that discipled me. They mentored me. I began doing Bible studies with them. And this is weird because I was already saved prior to that, but I didn't have like that community of fellowship. I didn't have discipleship. So for 10 years, yeah, I used to go to church and I was saved, but I was still one foot in the world. But when I met this group of women, they really loved on me and they showed me like what it is to live, the Christian lifestyle. So I began doing Bible studies with them. They mentored me, they discipled me, and few months later, just like that, my mentor was like, "Okay, you're teaching Bible study next week," and I was just like, "What? You're crazy! I've never done anything like that. I'm not ready." We always say that, like, I'm not ready, but I've learned that you're never really ready for any kind of assignment that God has for you.
Yeah.
You just have to be willing.
Yes.
So I was
Yes.
willing, and I began, teaching Bible study back in 2016, and from there on, like that's what I've been doing. I've been part of a women's ministry with different sisters from the church,
Yeah.
and it's been amazing. I don't regret it at all.
How about
It's
that?
helped me so much.
Yeah, I kind of see a lot of stuff that you post, and you're a great writer. A lot of things I see you doing the TikTok thing. Keep at it because it's actually, it's powerful. The things that you put on there. But one thing I wanted to ask you, this is probably gonna dig a little deeper, but we got short time, so I want to make sure I cover a lot. And one of the things that I really wanted to speak about was this part because that when it comes to this part, a lot of people are scared to, and some people will say some things about this part that I'm about to ask you, and I know you're gonna answer as truthful as you can, right? but I know you were in a relationship with somebody, and you actually called. You were married, and you got a divorce. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, so you got a divorce, and in this relationship, usually, you said that God called you to called you. I'm gonna let you explain it better. That way you
Mhm.
can. But in the end of the day, the question I'm asking you is that what made you sure when God said, "Follow me and pick up your cross," right? And you chose holiness over your marriage. Can you explain to everybody what I'm trying to say there?
Yes. I was with this person for 21 plus years. I did get, saved during our relationship. And, usually it's like that in relationships. One person gets saved first, and then the other one either gets saved or they don't. But in my case, I married this man thinking I was honoring God. I didn't wait for God to, you know, lead me or show me or give me a sign. I did it out of ignorance. I didn't even pray about it. I just said, hey, like, I want to honor God, I'm going to marry this guy. And I literally asked him, I was like, hey, let's get married, I want to honor God. And he was like, oh, okay. So it wasn't even that deep. Like, I don't think for him it meant as much as it meant for me. He just did it like to please me. But throughout this relationship, obviously, I was surrendered to Christ. I was growing in Christ. So he was calling me to do ministry. I was teaching Bible study. I would do outreach. We would go out to the street and, serve in the community, pray, serve the homeless, reach out to addicts and stuff like that. So the more I found myself being drawn to God and doing things he called me to do, it was causing friction in my marriage. Like, my ex-husband would literally just pick a fight after I would come back from Bible study or after coming home from church. Just anything that I had to do with God. Once I came back home, I would notice that, he was always angry. I understood I wasn't fighting the flesh. I know I was fighting the spirit. I was fighting Satan. He was using my ex-husband to sabotage my walk pretty much. So for a long time, I surrendered. And I mean, it wasn't easy. There were times I wanted to choke him, but
Yeah.
I tried to humble myself as much as I could. But the more I did that, the worse it got. It became abusive. It wasn't physical, but it became emotionally and mentally abusive. Um, he would just pretty much shut out and not speak to me for weeks, for days. um he was just angry, and for some reason I couldn't understand why. And months later, our relationship got worse. I questioned him. I was just like, what's going on? Like, why is this happening? Like, I'm home, I'm being a wife, like, I'm not out in the clubs, I'm not drinking, I'm not smoking, like, I'm doing my role as a wife. And the first thing he said was, because you're always choosing God. Like, you're always after God. Everything about you is God. All you talk about is God. Everything you listen to is God. And I was just taken back because I was just like, wow. Like, in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, God, like, I'm serving you. Like, I gave you my heart. Why is this happening? Like, I thought you're supposed to, bless my marriage or bless my home, but it wasn't that way. So for months, I prayed about it. Like, he just became so angry with me to the point where he was just not communicating with me at all. We became like roommates in the house, and our daughter who lived with us, she saw everything. um so we became roommates pretty much. He decided to go to the couch from one night to another, and I didn't understand why. I did go through anger. I began having resentment towards him, anger and bitterness. And I realized that I had opened the door, because when I would be around him, I began having like bad thoughts, like, because before I got saved, I used to, suffer. I mean, not suffer, but struggle with anger. So I was sometimes the physical one. I would break things, I would throw things at him. So I began having those thoughts, like, and I know that's not of God. but it was like daily it was becoming darker. The thoughts became darker, and I had to bring that to my sisters in Christ and let them know, like, hey, I think because I am holding anger and I'm not forgiving him for how he's treating me. Like, I think I opened the door to like a spirit. And because we do also have a deliverance ministry in the ministry that I'm in, my sister was like, you know, I think you opened the door to a spirit of unforgiveness or bitterness or both. So she did a deliverance on me, and sure enough, she said I manifested. I was angry, and finally, when she finished the deliverance, I felt peace. So I know how to go back home. I had to fight in the spirit and still somehow try to keep my marriage together because that's what I thought was right. That's what the church teaches. So here I am, months again. I'm trying to fight for the marriage and nothing's happening. Then, probably like 3 months later, again, my ex-husband's just like, you know what? I'm tired of this. Like, you need to choose God or you need to choose me. You either stop going to church, stop doing all this. I don't want to hear about God. Just stop it completely, or that's it. And I was just like, no, no, I'm not choosing anything before God. And I told them, I said, look, I love you, but God has saved me. God has done so much in my life that I'm not giving up God for nobody. I can't choose you over him. I'm sorry. And I told him specifically, and I remember these words, like I was just like, look, I'm still here fighting for this marriage because of God. Because if it wasn't for God, I would not be here. And nothing changed. He was just like, you know what, whatever, do what you want. Months later, I prayed about it. It was getting worse and worse. He would start attacking me. Now, at this point, he would start attacking me with words and just be mean, saying really horrible things in front of my daughter. Like, he had no filter. So at this point, I was just like desperate. I'm like, okay, I'm fighting for my marriage. It's getting worse. Now I'm being attacked by my husband. Like, God, like that's where I started crying. Now I'm like, God, like, is this really what it's supposed to be about? So before I made any decisions, I did speak to my pastor. I spoke to actually several pastors, different people from my church, elders, and I got different answers from
Yeah,
all of them. So that
that's one
caused
thing.
more confusion.
Totally
And
understand.
I'm just like, God, like, you know what? At this point, I felt abandoned, because I was literally living in the same home, but I was in my room 24/7. He was in the living room. And I was just like, it was like torture. It was horrible. You can feel the bad, like energy in the house. It wasn't of God. And, just as a woman, I don't know if guys go through the same thing. You start to question yourself, like, is it me? Am I not pretty enough?
Yeah, we
Or
do.
am I not,
We definitely do.
you know?
Yeah, we do.
So it's just, and of course the enemy has a playground in your mind and you just start thinking all kinds of things. And I remember one night I was just crying. I was like, God, like I've spoken to I don't know how many pastors, I don't know how many elders, everyone's saying different things. Like, I want to know from you. What do you want me to do, God? Like, I surrendered my life to you,
Yeah.
and although I know I married this man, probably out of God's will, because I did not hear from God. Like, help me. I still need your help. Like, what do you want me to do, Lord? Like, I will sit here as long as I have to until I hear from you. And that same night, he spoke to me. He said, you know what? You're going to be still for the next few months. And I was just like, oh, okay, at least I'm hearing something. It's not what I want to hear, but at least I heard from God. And he had me wait, be still for months. And he just kept telling me, read my word. I need you to fellowship just with me here, read my word. So I spent months just alone, isolation with God in my room, till finally, a few months later, he told me, you know what, you needed to shut those voices out because the voice that matters is mine. And now I'm going to tell you what to do. And I was just like, oh my God, like, it was beautiful. I'm not even going to lie, even in the midst of the pain and the brokenness, being that close to God that I can still hear him through those, storms. I know that he was going to do something. So I had to learn to be still. I had to learn patience. I had to learn humility because I still had to live in the same house where I was being attacked constantly. It
Right.
did something, and finally one day I was reading my Bible, different scriptures, and he spoke to me. He said, you know what? You are leaving this marriage because you are in bondage. You are in bondage and you're unequally yoked to something I did not call you to be in. So I'm giving you the green light. I don't want you to think religiously, but I want you to think relational. I set you free. I didn't set you free for you to be in bondage.
Mm,
And besides that, I set you free so you can serve me. This man's not gonna allow you to serve me. And I was just like,
wow.
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 I just
You know,
I just cried.
yeah. That is amazing. That is a powerful story because there's probably someone right now going through a similar situation, and they don't know how to go about it. Because to tell you the truth, man, the church will tell you, man, that's your marriage. You got to work it out. You got to do as much as you can. Listen, I'm going through my own situation. I know how it is. You hear different pastors say different things. You hear from, but the only one person you should always go to is God. Ask God, be acceptable. Understand, fast over your situation right now. If you're going through this, just hear God's voice. Spend alone time with God. Don't run to other people for an answer because the only thing they're gonna do, they're gonna maybe speak in their own experience, or they're gonna speak in experience that other people did. But the best experience and the best person you can listen to is the Holy Spirit when He sits in and resides in your heart, and that's the only way to go about it. I truly feel that way. Sometimes when your confusion is not of God, so I totally believe that. Stand still, sit there, don't make no
Yeah.
moves until God gives you the okay. So we're not sitting here and promoting getting divorced. We're just trying to let you know
Mm.
that sometimes, you know, we do things on our own will, free will. Sometimes we get in relationships with other people, and what ends up happening is that gotta be like, oh, okay, well, if that's what you want, go ahead. I had something else for you. I had something else planned for you, but you want to do your own thing. But understand there's going to be consequences afterwards.
Yeah.
I'm just letting you know that. Well, sometimes it's like God the Holy Spirit is a gentleman, right? God says, "I'm knocking your door. You invite me in. I eat with you, and you eat with me." God doesn't force Himself. See, we're not all God's children. We chose to be God's children. So understand that He gives you free will. Understand? So some of you guys are in some relationships today that God doesn't approve of. But understand the only way you will find that out if you search after God's own heart. But I have another
Yeah.
question for you, Yadi, right? Because you said you suffer from, you know, some things, right? And then the last question that I have for you, it says, okay, going back, it says if you're, let's just say you got an opportunity to minister to somebody right now watching or hearing your story that's went through an abusive relationship, or been thinking of contemplating on suicide, or they have anxiety so bad that they just trying to knock away the voices. The enemy right now is whispering in their ear right now and saying some things like, yo, your life, in your life. Or if right now you had the chance to speak to a person that right now is contemplating on suicide, what would you say right now?
Man, I would definitely say surrender everything to God. Every pain, every doubt, every darkness, like every thought, everything in your whole being, give it to God. Sometimes from my own experience, I have noticed you do have to go through really bad situations, probably even like the worst of the worst, be broken down, but that's where God can do so much in you and your brokenness. Like, don't give up. If you're alive, if your heart's beating, that's because God still has a plan for you. Like, He's not done with you. All we have to do is surrender and just seek after him. And the moment that you become humbled before him, I guarantee you that he will speak to you. You will feel his presence and you will hear him.
Wow.
But it's not worth it. Death is not worth it. There's so much beauty in the brokenness. I have learned and seen for myself. Like, I thank God for those experiences I've had because I would not have grown deeper into relationship with him if it wasn't for those dark moments.
Your brokenness is his beauty, you know. So just want you guys to understand that if right now you are going through this situation and you don't know how to handle it, man, that alone time, trust me, God is the restorer. He's the one that
Yeah.
he's the rescuer. He's the one that can confine your brokenness into beauty. He can make you flourish right now as we speak. If you just lift your hands up and give it all to him, believe me. But I just wanted to sit here and say thank you, Yadi. I will bring you on again, but you can come on here and maybe minister to some of these women out here. So I just appreciate you. I thank you guys for In Between the Line with Jay. This is the first one in a while. It's been a while since I did this, but y'all gonna hear some good stuff. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Speak to you guys soon. Love you guys. Speak life, not death. Say bye, Yadi.
Bye.